Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really dig into some powerful operating instructions, ideas for navigating, well, the chaos of modern life, leadership, organization, all of it.
That's right. And today, wow, we've got quite a stack. We're looking at thousands of years of thinking, political theory, military strategy, right up to, modern organizational psych.
It's a huge range, and we're trying to distill it all down into what, a single mission?
Pretty much. We're trying to synthesize these principles for, well, effective leadership, looking for that fundamental recipe, maybe, for organizational resilience.
Okay, resilience, meaning how you build teams, how you design systems that don't just, like, survive when things are calm.
Exactly. But systems and teams that are genuinely capable of thriving when things get complex, when uncertainty really hits.
Yeah.
Which, let's face it, is most of the time now.
True. So where are we drawing from? You mentioned the range.
Oh, yeah. We've pulled from Aristotle, Hobbes, Sun Tzu, big names, but also modern behavioral science, people who've actually turned around massive companies in the last century, real practitioners.
Okay, quite the task we've set ourselves. So where do we even begin with all this?
I think we have to start at the absolute ground floor, the foundation, which is this inescapable tension, really, between the individual and the system they're part of.
The person versus the organization, basically.
Yeah. You can't build anything that lasts, whether it's a country or a company, without figuring out who benefits and, crucially, at what cost.
Right.
Aristotle was wrestling with this way back. In his political theory, he saw this tension clear as day, individual gain versus the needs of the whole system.
And he had a pretty strong take on it, didn't he? Something about the virtue of the part.
He did. It's a powerful, almost stark statement. He says, the virtue of a part must be determined by looking to the virtue of the whole.
Wow. Okay, so immediately flips how we often think about performance, doesn't it? Like, individual achievement isn't the only measure.
Not at all. Your value isn't just what you do personally, but how you contribute to the collective success, to the stability of the whole thing.
That's a big shift.
It is, and it leads straight into what we could call the cost of stability. Aristotle knew, look, an ideal setup, a just constitution, should generally benefit the people in it, promote their happiness.
But there's always a but.
But perfect alignment, absolute congruence, it's impossible. You're always going to have forces, maybe individuals who are incredibly successful or powerful on their own, but who become disruptive to the larger structure. They throw things off balance.
Okay, so this is like the classic high-performing jerk problem we talk about in business today.
Yeah.
The person who hits all their numbers but makes everyone around them miserable.
It's definitely related to that. But Aristotle, well, he had a much more frankly, severe solution in his time. He recognized that sometimes someone's greatness, their influence, their individual virtue could actually threaten the balance that protects everyone else.
Threaten it how?
By becoming too powerful, too destabilizing. And this is where he justifies things like, well, ostracism in ancient Greece.
Ostracism, right. That was literally voting to kick someone out of the city for 10 years.
Exactly. Not because they'd committed a crime necessarily, but just because they were seen as too powerful, too popular, a potential threat to the democratic order.
That's intense. Sacrificing a great individual for this system.
It is. It makes it chillingly clear. The Constitution, the system, sometimes has to sacrifice one person's benefit, their success, even their presence, just to keep things stable for the rest.
So the governing body has to choose the path that preserves the whole, even if it's harsh.
It has to find the closest path to congruence, yeah. Even if that means removing a disruptive force. What's interesting for us, thinking organizationally, is Aristotle's finding about how you get stability.
Oops.
He found stability often came through breadth. Like a constitution based on the middle classes, he thought, was closer to a democracy. And he considered democracy more stable and freer from faction than oligarchy.
So narrow power structures, even if they seem efficient, are actually riskier, more prone to falling apart.
That's his take. They're inherently unstable. Power needs a broad base.
Which brings us to legitimacy, I suppose. That stability, that power, it has to be seen as legitimate, right? It can't just be sourced.
Absolutely. And if we shift from who benefits to where the power actually lives, or maybe where people agree it should live, Rousseau has this incredibly challenging take on sovereignty.
Rousseau. Okay. What's his angle?
He basically gives us the ultimate litmus test for whether a government or any ruling body is legitimate. He argues pretty radically that the moment a population promises simply to obey a ruler, it dissolves itself. The whole political entity just ceases to exist. There's no valid contract if one side completely gives up its will.
Wow. So obedience isn't enough. There has to be active consent.
It
Continuing.
continues active consent. The government's force, its actions, are only legitimate if they are a perfect extension of the general will of the people at that moment.
That sounds difficult to maintain.
Extremely, because think about it. If the executive, the prince in his terms, or maybe the CEO today, tries to act based on their own authority, their own self-interest,
Yeah.
Rousseau says you instantly create two sovereigns. You've got the rightful one, the general will, and then you've got the actual one, the executive acting alone.
And two sovereigns means conflict.
Total breakdown. He says the social union would evaporate instantly. It's incredibly fragile, a really high bar for leadership legitimacy, constant alignment with the collective will.
Okay, that's one end of the spectrum. But then you've got someone like Hobbes, who seems much more concerned with preventing that evaporation in the first place.
Right. Hobbes is definitely more, let's say, pragmatic about the need for consolidated power to just hold things together. Avoid that instant dissolution Rousseau fears.
How does he see it?
For Hobbes, law isn't about continuous consent. It's about reason, pure reason, but centralized and embodied in the state, the commonwealth.
The artificial man, as he calls it.
Exactly. Law is the reason of this, our artificial man and his command. So in this view, subordinate judges or mid-level managers in a company, they shouldn't just follow their own gut feeling or sense of justice. They need to understand and apply the reason that motivated the sovereign, the ultimate authority, to make that law or rule in the first place.
So it's about understanding the intent behind the centralized command, not just blindly following.
It's about adhering to the centralized logic. If Rousseau demands constant, almost agile, decentralized consent,
Yeah.
Hobbes demands strict adherence to the centralized rationale, the standard operating procedures, if you like.
So that's the tension right there, isn't it? Rousseau's agility versus Hobbes's stability through structure.
That is the modern organizational tension. Do you prioritize local alignment, the immediate general will think agile development maybe, or do you prioritize the wisdom and stability from the central structure, maybe more like traditional bureaucracy?
And the best organizations today are probably doing some kind of balancing act between those two.
They have to be. Walking that tightrope, managing that dynamic tension is key.
You know, this whole philosophical debate, it played out so clearly in the founding of the U.S. The Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. They were basically arguing Hobbes versus Rousseau, but with real stakes.
They absolutely were. The Anti-Federalists were deeply worried. They saw the proposed Constitution as a blueprint for a great, mighty, and splendid nation, an empire, essentially.
And they felt that contradicted the whole point.
Flatly contradicted it. They argued the American spirit was primarily about liberty, individual liberty, close to the people. Building a giant empire wasn't the goal.
And their worry wasn't just abstract philosophy, right?
Yeah.
It was practical,
Yeah.
about scale.
Very practical. They argued, look, if this government gets too big, too consolidated, too far away from the people, it won't actually bring happiness or secure liberty. It'll need, and this is their phrase, the ropes and chains of consolidation just to manage everything.
The cost of empire is freedom, basically.
That was their fear. And they had a specific worry about organizational design that's incredibly relevant if you think about, say, corporate mergers today. They worried that this big, consolidated government would suck the life out of the state constitutions, transfer their vital principle, reducing them to little more than, like, a city corporation with limited powers.
So they saw local structures, the states, as essential for liberty because they were close to the people.
Exactly. Consolidate that power, pull it all to the center, and you risk neutering those local units, destroying their unique vitality, their connection to the ground. Bureaucracy replaces responsiveness.
That phrase, destroying the vital principle, it sounds exactly like what Lou Gerstner found when he took over IBM in the 90s. That source talks about IBM's inward focus being a huge system failure.
It's a perfect corporate parallel. Gerstner steps in and finds what he called a hermetically sealed quality.
Hermetically sealed, meaning?
Meaning this ingrained institutional belief that anything truly important, anything innovative, must have started inside IBM. The outside world just didn't matter as much. The organization was completely insular.
So basically, navel-gazing on a massive corporate scale.
You could put it that way. And what did it lead to, practically? Intense internal politics, vicious turf defense between divisions, and critically, A collective blindness or disinterest in what customers actually needed or wanted.
IBM was serving itself, not the market.
Precisely. It was a consolidated power that had forgotten the external world. It perfectly validates those anti-federalist fears, just in a different context.
Okay, so the lesson there is systems need boundaries, sure, for definition.
Yeah.
But the mindset inside those boundaries has got to be looking outward.
That's the key, which brings us to a more modern strategic idea, the net positive concept.
Net positive, what's that about?
It argues for the complete opposite of a hermetically sealed company. It says the best way, the single best way to blow up mental boundaries inside your company
Yeah.
is to force the organization to truly understand the physical and natural boundaries out there in the real world. Environmental limits, social systems, resource constraints, the hard realities.
So instead of looking inward and fighting over the budget pie,
You look outward at the fixed constraints, the real world context, and you let those guide your internal thinking, your strategy, your decisions.
that makes sense. Your organization has to reflect the reality it operates in.
Exactly. These external boundaries should guide thinking in all organizations globally. It forces an outside-in perspective rather than IBM's inside-out. It builds stability by ensuring you stay relevant, preventing that dangerous insularity.
It sounds like the ultimate cure for organizational arrogance, really.
It could be a dose of external reality.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. The structure, the boundaries, the need for legitimacy and outward focus. Now, what about the person at the top? The leader.
Right. We move from the design of the house, so to speak, to the person who has to build it, run it, make the tough calls, the executive leader. And their character, well, many sources suggest that's the first, maybe the most critical component of stability, especially when stress or crisis hits.
And that brings us right to self-mastery, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think Stephen Covey really hammers this point home. The whole private victory precedes public victory idea.
That's the core sequence, according to Covey. You simply cannot effectively lead other people, manage complex relationships, or execute difficult strategies if you haven't mastered yourself first.
It's foundational.
Completely. Real influence, real respect. It doesn't come from slick techniques. It comes from dominion over self, from genuine independence and integrity.
So all those like human relations tricks,
Yeah.
they fall apart under pressure if the character isn't there. People see through it.
Instantly. The moment a tough decision is needed, or things get stressful, if your actions aren't rooted in solid character, those superficial relationships just collapse. People sense the inconsistency, the lack of inner resource.
And this isn't a new idea, is it? You mentioned ancient sources too.
Not at all. This character ethic is ancient. Confucius, when someone asked him about how to govern effectively, his answer was incredibly simple. Set an example yourself and then urge the people on.
No delegation of virtue. The leader has to embody it.
Precisely. And maybe the ultimate illustration of this dedication comes from Xenophon's writing about Cyrus the Great.
Ah, Cyrus. What was the lesson there?
His father apparently taught him that the people, the soldiers, they expect the ruler to plan for them, to look out for them. Therefore, the leader must, and this is the quote, never know a careless mood.
Never know a careless mood. Wow. What does that mean in practice?
Think about the weight of that. Constant vigilance. 204/7 responsibility. If it's night, the leaders should be thinking about what the troops need to do when day breaks. If it's day, they need to be planning how the night should best be used.
So it's not just discipline, it's this constant state of foresight, thinking ahead for everyone else.
Yes, it's an internal commitment to perpetual planning and preparation. And that's what earns and sustains the trust of the people you lead. They believe you're looking out for them because you are.
That relentless foresight feels crucial because, as you said, when crisis hits, you almost never have all the information you want.
Never. Which leads directly to the next key leadership trait: decisiveness amidst uncertainty. This comes through really strongly in that Navy SEAL philosophy, extreme ownership.
Right. They talk about the incomplete picture principle.
You do. In combat, and it's just the same in business strategy, really, outcomes are never certain. You never have perfect intel. And the sources here are really clear. Chasing the 100% right and certain solution is fatal.
Why fatal? Because you wait too long.
Exactly. It leads to delay, hesitation, loss of initiative, the window closes. Leaders, they argue, have to get comfortable operating in the chaos. You make an educated guess based on your experience, the intel you do have, and then you act decisively, aggressively.
So accepting that maybe 70% certainty is the best you're going to get And acting on that is better than waiting for 100% and guaranteeing failure.
That's the essence of it. And this need for facing reality, however brutal, connects to Andrew Grove's experience at Intel during their big shift.
It's a strategic inflection point when the whole game changes. For Intel, that was moving away from memory chips. Right?
Yeah. Correct, a fundamental shift. And for the existing management, the people who built their careers on the old model, this isn't just a business problem. It's a deep emotional crisis. Their identity is tied to the past.
So how does a leader navigate that? Overcome that really powerful emotional attachment?
Grove's advice is pretty stark. He says they have to adopt an outsider's intellectual objectivity.
Like seeing the company as if for the first time.
Almost.
Yeah.
He uses this metaphor. You have to figuratively walk out the door, kill your own darlings, stomp out your emotional cigarettes, and then walk back in, completely clear-eyed, unfettered by nostalgia or past successes.
Wow. That takes serious discipline.
It does. Decisiveness in that context means the willingness to brutally assess reality and, if necessary, fundamentally change or even abandon the company's previous identity to ensure survival. Your commitment has to be to the future, not the past.
Okay, so you've made the hard, decisive commitment. Now you have to execute. And that execution needs flexibility, which sounds like where Sun Tzu comes in.
Sun Tzu, the master strategist, he gives us this brilliant concept for maneuver. The strategic duality of Cheng and Qi.
Cheng and Qi. Am I saying that right? What do they mean?
You got it. Cheng is basically the direct force, the expected move, the main attack, the normal operation. Qi is the indirect, the unexpected, the flanking maneuver, the surprise.
Okay, direct and indirect. Seems straightforward enough.
Well, yes and no. The real genius, according to the commentators on Sun Tzu, is that this distinction isn't fixed. It's not static. Cheng and Qi are mutually interchangeable. They run into each other like the two sides of a circle.
Like two sides of a circle, so they can flip. What's direct today could be indirect tomorrow.
Exactly. The secret isn't just having two types of maneuvers. It's making the enemy believe your feint is the main attack, or that your main attack is just a feint.
Confusion. It's about messing with the enemy's perception.
Totally. The whole point is confusing the enemy so they can't figure out your real intent. An operation might start as Qi, a surprise, but once the enemy reacts and focuses on it, it effectively becomes Cheng, the expected thing. Then you hit them with a new Qi somewhere else.
So it's constantly shifting.
Constantly. And this dynamic is so powerful, Sun Tzu says, that if you master it, and crucially, if you master the signs and signals needed to coordinate these complex moves across a large force, then fighting a huge army is strategically no different from fighting a small one.
That's incredible, managing that complexity through this dual approach.
It is. And that ability to manage complexity, that duality, it raises a really interesting modern strategic question. Not about war, but about market focus.
Okay.
Should a leader focus the company's resources narrowly, trying to dominate a specific niche, or spread them more broadly to keep options open, maybe handle more uncertainty, focus versus breadth?
Right. I see that dilemma play out all the time.
Well, Lou Gerstner at IBM, again, he faced exactly this. He looked at the market in the early 90s and realized the world did not need one more disk drive company, one more operating system company, one more PC company.
Competing everywhere meant being mediocre everywhere.
Pretty much. A breadth strategy, trying to be in all those commodity markets, was just suicide for IBM at that point. They couldn't win on price against nimbler competitors.
So he chose focus, the integrator strategy?
Yes. He decided to leverage IBM's scale and deep technical expertise to solve complex problems for big customers, integrating different technologies, providing end-to-end solutions. It was a clear choice for deep focus over commodity breadth. Find the value in solving the hardest problems.
That makes a strong case for focus, for specialization.
It does, especially in established markets. But
Yeah.
there's contrasting research. If you're not just competing in today's market, but trying to invent tomorrow's, specialization might actually hold you back.
Oh, how so?
There's research that looked at technical patents across hundreds of organizations, and they split innovations into low uncertainty domains where the next steps are kind of obvious, improvements are incremental, and high uncertainty domains.
High uncertainty meaning you don't even know what the right questions are yet.
Exactly. Where most attempts fail, but the rare success is a massive breakthrough. Think truly disruptive innovation. And the finding was stark.
Yeah.
As ambiguity and uncertainty go up,
Yeah.
breadth becomes more and more important.
So when the path is clear, specialists win. But when you're hacking through the jungle, trying to find a path, generalists are better.
That's the implication. In those high uncertainty areas, teams where members had worked across a wide variety of different technologies, different fields, they were significantly more likely to generate those high-impact breakthrough innovations.
Why? Because they could connect dots others couldn't. Challenge assumptions.
Precisely. The broader the experience base on the team, the better equipped they are to think outside the usual boxes and come up with something genuinely new for an unknown future. So the leader's job becomes assessing what kind of uncertainty are we really facing, and then structuring the team focus or breadth to match that reality.
That's a critical strategic judgment call,
Yeah.
which leads us perfectly into the teams themselves. How do you actually build these highly effective, creative teams, whether focused or broad?
Right. We're moving inside the engine room now.
Yeah.
And if you want real creativity, real innovation, one of the first things you absolutely have to tackle is the organization's relationship with failure.
Failure. The F word in many companies.
It often is. But here, context is everything. You have to critically assess your industry. Look, if you're running a nuclear power plant or an airline, yeah, the goal of zero failures is paramount.
Yeah.
Safety critical.
Obviously.
But if you're in creative work, R&D, innovation, anywhere you're pushing boundaries then aiming for zero failures isn't just useless, it's actively counterproductive. It kills the very thing you need.
Because innovation inherently involves trying things that won't work out.
Exactly. You can't learn, you can't discover without experiments that fail. Pixar, famously, had to figure out how to institutionalize this understanding.
How do they do it? Did they just celebrate failure?
Not exactly celebrate it, but they built a system to make failure cheap. They didn't eliminate risk, they managed it intelligently.
Okay, cheap failure. How?
They mitigated the risk of a huge, catastrophic $200 million movie failure by allowing directors to spend years in the development phase. This is deliberately designed as a low-cost iteration environment.
So lots of sketches, storyboards, testing ideas.
Right. The main costs are just salaries for the director and a small team of story artists. You work through ideas cheaply on paper or simple animation reels. You find the problems early. You don't escalate to the really high-cost production, the rendering, the huge teams, until the story structure is proven solid.
That structural separation is genius. It protects the creative process, allows for necessary failure and iteration without betting the farm each time.
It's incredibly smart risk management for creativity. But interestingly, the sources also point out that even success can create its own problems.
Success creates problems. How?
Organizational inertia, complacency. At Pixar, for example, after their incredible string of hits, some of the newer folks were apparently in awe of the place.
Intimidated by the track record.
Exactly. And because of that awe, they were reluctant to offer real criticism or suggest significant changes to works in progress. Success can actually breed a fear of rocking the boat, of disrupting the magic formula.
So how do you fight that? How do you keep the feedback honest, even when you're successful?
You need structures and culture that demand candor, but in a supportive way. Which brings us to something like Pixar's brain trust model.
Well, brain trust, that's their feedback group, right?
It's much more than just a review meeting, though. It's built on a specific social contract. It involves director-level peers, colleagues who are fundamentally bonded as a group. Critically, they are not competing with each other for resources or for the next big project.
So the incentives are aligned towards helping the project, not individual gain.
Precisely. It has to be a candid and supportive system. Though feedback is brutally honest, yes, but the underlying goal is always to make the film better, never to boost the critic's ego or tear down the director.
That trust sounds essential. And does that need for trust scale beyond just small creative groups?
Absolutely. It has to scale across the whole enterprise. There's that great analysis in Team of Teams about organizational failure.
What was the failure mode there?
They describe this hourglass figure structure. Imagine a large organization, say military intelligence. You've got teams out in the field operating, and you've got analysts back at headquarters crunching data. Both groups are working hard.
Okay.
But the relationship between them is almost non-existent. The only connection is through this narrow bureaucratic choke point in the middle of the hourglass. Information flows poorly, slowly.
So the people on the ground, the people analyzing, don't really connect or understand each other's context.
Barely. The analysis showed that if you removed one half of the hourglass, the other half wouldn't even notice for a while. The connection was that weak, that constrained.
Wow. So what was the fix? Just restructure?
No, the insight was that structural change wasn't the core issue. The necessary transformation was scaling trust and purpose across the entire massive enterprise. You couldn't make the whole task force into one small, agile team, obviously,
Right.
but they had to achieve a team-like oneness, a shared consciousness across thousands of people without relying on the slow, rigid hierarchy. That scaled trust is what allows critical information and necessary feedback to flow freely and quickly.
And when you have that high trust, high flow environment, you start seeing different kinds of leadership emerge,
Yeah.
right? Like the multipliers idea,
Exactly. Multipliers are leaders who make a fundamental shift in their focus. They stop putting their energy into proving how smart they are.
which is what diminishers do, the ones who suck the oxygen out of the room.
Right. Instead, multipliers focus their energy on extracting and extending the genius and capability of the people around them.
They see their job as making everyone else smarter and more effective.
Precisely. And the research suggests this isn't just feel-good stuff. It generates a measurable effect, like a 2x productivity boost, because they create an environment where smart people feel empowered to solve problems rather than just waiting for the boss's answer. They amplify the talent that's already there.
Amplifying talent often means helping people see things differently, doesn't it? Sometimes literally overcoming their own ingrained ways of seeing the world.
Yes, and this brings us back to Pixar, actually, and some fascinating insights from perceptual studies used in their creative training
About how we see.
about how our brains can actually get in the way of accurate observation. The goal is learning to suppress the brain's L mode.
L mode, left hemisphere.
Exactly. The verbal, analytic, logical side that's super quick to categorize and label everything. That's a chair, that's an eye. The problem is the L mode doesn't just label. It imposes its pre-existing mental model onto what you're seeing.
So we end up drawing the symbol for an eye rather than the actual complex shapes and shadows we're looking at.
That's exactly it. We draw what we know or think we know instead of what we see. So art teachers use these clever tricks to bypass the dominant L mode.
Like what?
One classic trick is drawing an object upside down. The L mode looks at it, doesn't recognize it as a familiar thing like chair or face, and kind of gives up, allowing the more visual R mode, right hemisphere, to take over and just see the lines and shapes accurately.
Interesting.
Another is focusing on negative spaces. Like instead of drawing the chair legs, you focus on drawing the shapes of the empty spaces between the legs.
Because the brain doesn't have a label for space between chair legs.
Right. There's no stored symbol for that negative shape. So the L mode doesn't interfere, it doesn't try to correct it based on a model, and you end up rendering the complex proportions of the actual chair much more realistically by focusing on what's not there.
That failure to suppress our own models, our preconceptions, that sounds like the exact same communication breakdown Covey talked about. The logical left brain manager clashing with the intuitive right brain employee.
It's the same fundamental dynamic. The left brain person is demanding beta, specifics, facts. Give me the numbers. Give me something concrete.
While the right brain person is operating on feelings, intuition, the overall picture, the gestalt.
Exactly. They might say, I just have a general sense this isn't the right priority, or I feel like the team dynamic is off. And the left brain manager hears that and often dismisses it as vague fluff because it's not quantifiable.
And the communication just dies right there.
It stalls completely. So effective leaders, Covey argues, have to be able to bridge that gap. They need to recognize which mode the other person is operating in and genuinely try to understand their perspective, their paradigm, before jumping in with logic or solutions. Seek first to understand.
That takes empathy and flexibility. And sometimes improving communication can be simpler, right? Like just changing one word in how you ask questions.
Oh, absolutely. On a very practical coaching level, this is huge. The rule of thumb is stick religiously to asking what questions and try very hard to avoid asking why questions.
Why? Why avoid why?
Oops. See, even when you mean well, asking why, like why did you choose that approach or why did that happen, it almost instantly puts people on the defensive.
It sounds like an accusation, like what were you thinking or whose fault is this?
Exactly. That perceived judgment triggers defensiveness. And then instead of focusing on solving the problem or moving forward, the person starts focusing on justifying their past actions, explaining the backstory, defending their emotional state. It shifts the focus backward.
Whereas what questions keep it forward-looking?
Generally, yes. Questions like, what are the options now? What do you see as the next step? What would need to happen for this to work? They tend to keep the focus on outcomes, on future actions, removing that element of implied judgment about the past.
That's a really useful practical tip. Okay, we've covered structure, leadership character, strategy, team dynamics, even how we perceive and communicate.
Mm.
Let's try to wrap this huge synthesis up by connecting it to the highest level drivers, things like purpose, virtue, the big why.
Yeah, because ultimately, what truly drives engagement and sustained effort, purpose is definitely a powerful engine. We see research showing that purpose-led organizations, ones with clear missions beyond just profit, focused on genuinely serving stakeholders.
Yeah.
They tend to spin what's called the purpose flywheel faster. They build momentum, they grow, often because they are perceived as giving more than they take. That commitment to service becomes an accelerating force itself.
And that idea of commitment to a higher purpose, it echoes through ancient wisdom too, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
the different paths or modes of living described in texts like the Bhagavad Gita.
It really does. The Gita, for instance, presents a kind of hierarchy of engagement with life and work. It suggests living entities wander through cycles of birth and death unless they find a higher purpose.
And it ranks different approaches.
Yes. It states that the yogi, the person who is fully dedicated to spiritual practice, to unwavering connection with a higher principle, serving Kinter or God in its context, is considered superior.
Superior to whom?
Superior to the tapasvi, who is the ascetic just focused on performing austerities or penance. Superior to the janani, the philosopher who is mainly engaged in intellectual speculation. And superior to the karmi, the ordinary worker who is solely focused on enjoying the immediate fruits of their labor, their paycheck, their bonus.
So it's a progression, moving beyond just self-interest, beyond just intellectual understanding, towards this state of full dedicated alignment with a higher purpose, service over self.
That's the idea. Those who find that transcendental focus, that ultimate why, are said to avoid many of the pitfalls and anxieties that trouble those operating at lower levels of purpose. And if you bring that back to the organizational leader, this internal dedication to a higher standard, to virtue, it actually elevates their external influence. Confucius observed something similar. The exemplary person attracts loyal friends and followers through their inner refinement, their character, and that's how they promote authoritative, effective conduct. The power flows from the inside out.
So the internal quality shapes the external reality.
In this view, yes. The virtue is the source of the might.
Okay. That's a powerful place to pause and try to summarize. We've covered a massive amount of ground.
We really have. From Aristotle worrying about political stability thousands of years ago to modern tech leaders worrying about market disruption today. But if there's a synthesis emerging from all these different sources,
Yeah. What is it?
I think it's that organizational excellence demands this relentless pursuit of competence. Absolutely. You need smart strategy, efficient systems. But that competence has to be built on, rigorously layered upon, a foundation of character.
Confidence isn't enough.
It's necessary, but not sufficient. Real, sustainable success seems to require principled leadership, the humility to see failure not as disaster, but as necessary, R&D, especially cheap failure. It requires strategic flexibility, that Cheng and Chi dynamism, and it requires a deep, deliberate, ongoing effort to understand human dynamics.
Everything from how an individual brain perceives a chair, to how a soldier perceives a threat, to how a team builds trust.
Exactly. Understanding the human element in all its complexity.
So thinking about the listener, the person out there leading, building, trying to make things work, what's the final takeaway for you? What does this all really mean?
I think it means that the ultimate source of your organization's power, its resilience, its long-term success, it might not actually be in your fancy title or your market share or even the sophistication of your technology.
Where is it then?
It might just be in the internal quality of the human beings involved, especially the leaders. Their character, their self-mastery, their purpose.
Yeah, feels profound. And it reminds me of something Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote. He connected that inner quality, that behavior, directly back to strength, to might. He said, "A beautiful behavior is better than a beautiful form. It gives a higher pleasure than statues or pictures. It is the finest of the fine arts."
The finest of the fine arts, behavior itself.
Yes. And then he recalls this idea, almost like an eternal law, that first in beauty shall be first in might.
First in beauty, first in might.
Which suggests maybe that your internal quality, your commitment to virtue, your self-mastery, that beautiful behavior isn't just nice to have. It is ultimately the most powerful and the most enduring strategic advantage you can possibly possess in this messy, complex, chaotic world we're all navigating.
A challenging but maybe hopeful thought to end on.
Think about that this week. The finest of the fine arts isn't just what you create, but how you behave, how you lead. Go forth, be well-informed, and lead beautifully.